Thank you, Yoko, as always, for doing such a great job organizing so many different things. It's a real pleasure to introduce Nicolas. He has been one of TESS's shining stars. We are so grateful to him. Every single kind of activity you could ask, from giving seminars to 3M competitions to helping to organize things in Townsville, to driving the van up to Cairns for our annual conference, to many other things. Nicolas has always been the first to put up his hand, and he's just been a fantastic person. Those of you out there in positions of importance, please give this man a job. He deserves a job very much. At JCU, he did his PhD using remote sensing techniques to study phenological changes in mangroves, which of course are a hugely important vegetation group around the world. And he's now at ANU, where he's extending his work and continuing on new lines of research. So we're really pleased to have Nicolas here telling us about his research activities. Nicolas, thank you.
Thanks, Bill, and thanks, Yoko, for inviting me once again to give a TESS seminar. It's always great to be back to the alma mater, if you like, and Bill, Yoko, the TESS team has been great for my professional development. So every activity that TESS organizes is great. So please, if you're a student, go ahead, get involved. It's a great community. And also a big shout out. Sadly, I probably won't be able to attend the TESS retreat, but I encourage everyone to do so. So register now. And without further ado, I'm going to share my screen. And please do let me know if you can see that. Just a thumbs up would be good. Okay. Good. So I know that many of you are in lockdown, and I try to make my presentation a little bit shorter. I know that you spend a lot of time inside and probably you are eager to go outside. So bear with me for the next half an hour or so while we talk about things that you remember and geospatial and what is a space station. So read a couple of the questions that are on the screen right now and try to remember the first time you fell off a bike, or what is the hottest chili you ever ate. And also try to think about what's the prettiest beach you have been to. And try to get these memories back. And I'm going to ask you, what do these events have in common? Bikes, chilies, and beautiful beaches. Well, they all have in common that you can remember a space, you can remember the location of where those things happen. Oh, I was at this beautiful beach that day with so-and-so, or the hottest chili was really hot and it was this Indian or Japanese or Latin American restaurant. It was delicious, but it was so hot. Or I scraped my hand the first time I fell off my bike and it was on the street right down from my house. And these things, believe it or not, are geospatial events. So what is geospatial? Geospatial is often described as the science of where things happen. But I think there's a little bit, there's something missing in this definition, and it's because you remember when, you can also remember the time things happen. So when you fell off your bike, you were 3 or you were 5 or you were 10 years old, or it was 2019 the last time you went to a beautiful beach, I don't know. So to me, geospatial is the science of where things happen and when things happen. And so this brings me to space stations. What is a space station? It's simply a Tessian that loves geospatial and space-related technologies. And I will say that I am a self-confessed space station. I love geospatial technologies, everything that has to do with space. So if you have any questions, I'm really happy to chat and looking forward to it. So this is what I'm going to talk about this afternoon. Geospatial technologies in general, how does geospatial match with TESS, with the activities that TESS does? Remember that TESS focuses on the tropics and environmental and sustainability science, all these things. How are these two things, how do they come together? Now, afterwards, I'm going to talk a little bit what I did, what I'm doing, and what's the future work that I plan to do. And if you're a student, I encourage you to stay until the end, because the future is really bright for you if you are into geospatial sciences. So, why geospatial? Geospatial helps you understand where things happen and when. And that's important because it allows us to quantify and identify patterns. Okay, so where is deforestation happening? Where are roads being built? Where are the species that are most likely to be extinct in the next couple of years? Or simply, if the sea level rises, what are the low-lying areas that are a risk? So quantifying patterns, identifying trends, but also visualize change over time. And if you were here at the TESS seminar last week, you saw a great example of visualizing changes over time. Nick Murray talked about intertidal ecosystems, and he had some very nice data visualization. But it's also about combining seemingly unrelated data. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a minute. So remember where things happen and when. So where a picture was taken, this can be with your phone, this can be from an airplane or a satellite. Anything can have a location right now. Where the bushfires start, this is really important for imagining Greece right now. Where are they happening? Where are they going? How far are they spreading? Where do car accidents happen? If you live in Cairns and drive often to Kuranda, you know that that specific stretch of road is quite propense for to car accidents. So we need to know where and when, what's the time of day when these events usually happen. For example, where mangroves are present and when they are not, where they are not. Where is there more biomass in the Amazon forest or far north Queensland or the great savannas of the Australian red centre? What's the fastest way from A to B? Your cell phone, this little guy right here, it's a geospatial tool, believe it or not. Now, let me talk a little bit about how TESS and geospatial are related to one another. And I wanted to show you this picture of the night sky. This is a couple of years old, but it definitely tells you where things are happening and where things are not. So if you look at Europe or the US, you can see that most of the area is very bright. This means that there are a lot of cities, a lot of towns. And remember that this image was captured by a satellite close to 1,000 kilometers from the sky. So these are very bright places. Look at Japan, look at India. If you look at India, you can see that pretty much every square kilometer is inhabited. But also look at South America. Look at the Amazon basin right here, or look at the great forests of Central Africa or even Central Australia, where things are happening and when. If you ever thought about taking a trip to Hawaii, which is roughly here, then there are many places. You will not find many uninhabited islands over there. So remember that geospatial, the location of things, where things are happening, this is really, really important. Now, looking through TESS seminars and talking to people that work at TESS or at JCU and are related to TESS, I came across a few types of data sets that Tessians use. So many people use financial data, human mobility, where things are going to and from, transportation, demographics, which ones are the youngest countries or countries with the youngest population, and which locations have the oldest people. So for example, Japan, road traffic. Remember, this guy, your cell phone, is a geospatial tool. That's how Google measures the traffic. Public health, there are many, many people working with public health data sets, species distribution, either hardcore data sets or modeling. Every species distribution model has a location attached to it. Environmental sciences and those data sets very, very broadly, more often than not, have a location attached to those. And so that's agriculture and natural resources. And the important thing about geospatial is that we can look at changes over time. We can look at slow changes or abrupt changes, or things that happen really fast or really slow. And let me give you a couple of examples. We can see slow changes, and for example, Nick Murray showed one of those examples last week. This is another one. This is from Peru. And what I'm going to show you is how the riverbed changes over time. Over the space of 30 years, this river moves from its original position in yellow to the latest known location of the riverbed in blue. And why is this important? Well, mainly because you don't want to be anywhere close this riverbed. If you're gonna build your house, or if you're gonna build your farm or a school, because these rivers, these meandering rivers, change and change really quickly. Over the space of 30 years, you can see where areas that were once a strong landmass, now they're not. Have a look at where I'm pointing. You can see how there was once a river, then it moves to land, and then it's a river again. But also, we can also see abrupt changes. So these are changes that happen from one year to the next, or from one day to the next, or monthly or weekly. And staying in South America, this is an example from Paraguay. And what I'm going to show you is deforestation. This map shows you deforestation of forest that's very close to the state of Mato Grosso. Yoko might know this place very well. And so Fabio, who was a visitor at TESS many years ago. Well, the important thing here is that you can see that from one year to the next, there are these very abrupt changes that we capture with geospatial information. The next thing that I'm going to show you is changes at the global scale. So similar to other work that I have shown you right now, we can see the population density. So we are combining these data sets with the location where things are happening. If you look at France, for example, here, you can see that there's a lot of people in Paris, and the same thing with London, which is right here, and Madrid, which is spot on in the middle of Spain. But if you start comparing Europe to Northern Africa, you can start seeing some stark differences. There are places in Europe that are very densely populated, as opposed to Northern Africa, which is not as populated. And there are many reasons why this happened. The important thing is that we can show where this is happening and when these things are happening. And this is an example of a global scale data set, but we can also go very, very localized. And what I'm going to show you is related to inequality. This is the Atlas of Inequality developed by the MIT. And what you're seeing on your screen is the city of New York. This big island is Manhattan, and to the west and to the east of Manhattan, you can see that there is either New Jersey or one of the other regions of New York City. In the blue dots, or in the colored dots, you can see how unequal is a retail establishment. And one of the things that you can see is that in Manhattan, there are a lot of light blue color. So what that is telling you is that people from the same or roughly the same income level, either very high or very low or median income, usually attend places that are catered to those incomes. So either you are an executive and go to very fancy restaurants, or you are a tradie that goes to a regular coffee shop. That's what that map is telling you. And you can see that spot on in the middle of Manhattan, everything is blue, or most of the places are blue. And the further away you go from Manhattan, the more unequal things get. So for example, look at this region. You can see that there are a lot of red and yellow dots. That means that either someone with a very high income, for example, goes to a very low income shop, or the other way around. Someone from a low income background or with a low income goes to a very fancy shop or retail establishment. And you can see that it extends all the way to the other side, to the west in this case. So we can measure these things, and we can put a location of where things are happening, And if we do this over time, we can start measuring when. And when things happen is critical. And yeah, so in yellow, you can see Athens and you can see other cities. These are the past 24 hours of satellite imagery over Greece and Turkey. In the red dots, you are going to see the fires. And as you can see, the second biggest island in Greece has been pretty badly burned. If you look at Turkey here on the right, some of the fires are very close to cities, and this is where all these terrible pictures and videos are coming from. So knowing where things are happening is very, very important. I will come back to my presentation and hopefully it will work. And can you see my presentation?
Yes, it's in black.
Yeah, it's in black. Okay, nice. So now let me talk about how I work with geospatial technologies, and I'm going to go through my past work, my present work, and my future work, which is really, really exciting to me right now. Now, in the past, you have seen me talk about mangrove ecosystems, and although I love mangrove ecosystems, I'm not going to talk about them right now, because there are many other ways in which we can apply geospatial sciences. So what about coral and rock and sand? You probably know or heard of Karen Joyce. This is a piece of work that I did with Karen and also with master students, Katie Bennett. And so we were looking at geospatial analysis of coral and sand and where coral is happening and when. If you are familiar with the Great Barrier Reef, then you might recognize this piece of land that is Heron Island. And these black squares represent drone images. So what they did is they flew a drone, took a lot of pictures, and so we wanted to see where corals were happening. But not only where the corals were happening, but also we were trying to differentiate between live coral, dead coral, and all of the other things that happen in reefs. So if you zoom into that picture, you can see that we have very, very high resolution. We can measure, we can see very clearly where live corals are, where dead corals are, and where there is just sand. So what we did is we took a machine learning approach and we looked at every single image and we came up with this classification, and we could estimate the amount of coral cover in each of the drawn images. So let me show you what that looks like. In different colors, in green, purple, and yellow, you can see the coral, rock, and sand proportions respectively. And this picture right here, this image, has very high coral cover, as opposed to this picture here on the right that has very low coral cover. And this is one of the ways in which we have used geospatial science at TESS. Now, let me bring you to a different environment completely. How do you know if animals prefer forests of plantations? And this is a study that we did in Colombia. You might remember Lain. He was the leading force in this paper, in which most of the authors were actually TESS people, or people related to TESS. So what did we do? We looked at the location of plantations and where animal sightings were, and we thought, okay, how much plantation versus forest there is in each one of those sites? And we can quantify that. We can measure the amount of forest that is in a site, or we can measure the amount of plantation, or in this case, oil palm plantation, how much there is in each site. And Fabio and Lain did a very fancy analysis, and they came up with an answer. So most of the animals, what you're seeing is Titan analysis, and on the x-axis, you can see the percent of oil palm cover, and each one of the y-axis animals represents exactly that, an animal. In black, you see the animals that prefer mainly forest, and in red, you can see the animals, or the animal that prefers mainly oil palm plantation. So using geospatial analysis, we can say most of the animals prefer 50% or less plantation. So they want to be in the forest. They love being in the forest. And if we cross this threshold, if we chop down the forest and put some oil palm plantations in there, these animals are not going to be happy, and they're probably going to move. So that's up to ecologists to decide what's going to happen with that ecosystem. But we as geospatial analysts can help them come to those conclusions. Now, I talked briefly about fire and floods. What about landslides? This is a project that was done in Ecuador a few years ago with Estefania Erazo, who's online apparently. She's also a member of TESS. And in pink here, you can see the study site. And the study site is particular because it's to the west of the Andes. So it covers a lot of altitude changes. So at the highest peak right here, that is close to 3,000 meters above the sea level. And in the west side of the study site, that's around 1,200 meters. So there's a 2,000 meter gap, or about a 1,500 meter elevation gap. And the important thing is that there is a highway that connects the cities in the Andes to the cities in the lowlands. And that's exactly the highway. And all those dots that you see in that image are landslides that we know have happened. So we can put the location of a landslide and we can say, okay, what is causing these landslides? And that's exactly what we did. We took a bunch of measurements, soil type, the elevation changes, and many other things. And we arrived at the conclusion that, well, the highway is not the main factor. So the highway is not causing more or less landslides. It's mainly about the soil type. And that was an interesting finding for us. So where things happen and when. If you know that there's going to be a lot of rain, then you want to protect your lands, your highways, your infrastructure, your schools, your hospitals. This is why this is important. Now, this comes the very exciting part for me. What am I doing right now? Well, I am looking at bushfires. And it's very topical, and this is going to be very brief because it's ongoing work, but you might have seen images like this before. On the left-hand side, you see a picture or a depiction of the southeast coast of Australia and some of the fires. But one thing that I want to point out is that this animation only goes until January 2020. And as you know, the bushfire season extended far longer than that. Now, you would be amazed, but Australia does not have a single continental scale assessment of bushfires. The assessment of bushfires is done at a state basis. So Queensland has a different way of assessing how much area there was burned, as opposed to New South Wales. And Victoria and Tessian, each state does their own independent thing. So it's important to know how much area, how frequently it burns. And when things happen is really important, because from the 2019 to 2020 bushfire season, you would say, oh, bushfires are very rare, but very intense. And that might be the case for Southeastern Australia. But if you look at the Northern Territory or the central regions of Australia, you can see that bushfires happen all the time, probably throughout the year. And that's because the ecosystem is different. And that's why it's important to understand where things happen and when. In my case, what I'm doing right now is I'm focusing mainly on eucalypt-dominated forests. And what I'm trying to do is to try to find out which areas are most likely to burn. And why am I focusing on eucalypts? Well, we all know that eucalypts are the home of koalas, these very cuddly, nice-looking animals. But we also know that for some reason, eucalypts are more flammable than other species. So the aim of my project is to actually measure this flammability, both in the lab and using geospatial tools. And this is how I am doing it. I'm doing some modeling, I'm taking leaf samples, and I'm using remote sensing as in geospatial tools. And then I close the circle and start again, modeling, leaf samples, remote sensing, and again and again. This is one of the tools that I use. I not only use satellites, but just like your phone, this very fancy camera allows me to see things that are not usually visible for the human eye. And so this is what the camera is looking at. And just from these two pictures, you can see that there are a lot of holes in the ground. Maybe that is less flammable and we can use bare ground as fire breaks, but you can also see differences in the eucalypts. So there are places that are brighter than others. So why are these differences happening? And this is where the biochemistry comes in. when I take the leaf samples and analyze them, I take small bunches, and in the green, right here, these nice little discs are sections of eucalypt leaves. And this white stuff is pure cellulose. So that's the thing that burns. And what I'm trying to do is try to measure how much cellulose there is in the eucalypts by using laboratory techniques. And I use a wide variety of them. I use pipettes and film hoods and a lot of other equipment. All of them, or most of them, are related to remote sensing, something that I can relate to satellites afterwards. And so that's a little bit of what I'm currently doing, but this is the most exciting part for me. And if you're a student and you're interested in geospatial sciences, let me tell you, the future is bright. I cannot say at this point in time, maybe in 1 or 2 weeks, I can say more, but right now I am part of a team that's designing a satellite to monitor bushfires. So actually designing the satellite, this is very, very exciting for me. It's something that I never thought that I would be doing as an environmental engineer. If you had told me 10 or 15 years ago, hey, are you gonna design satellites in the future? I would have said no. But there you go. Geospatial sciences are going to open doors for you, and many, many doors. Now, I want to finish by saying that the future is bright for geospatial sciences, and especially if you're a student, the future is bright. There are many things happening. And geospatial is on the radar of governments everywhere in the world. This is a report that came a few months ago, and they say that satellite observations contribute 5 billion to Australia's GDP. 5 billion, that's a lot. That's a lot. This is the State of Space report. This is from 2018. And they say that Earth observation has uncapped potential to growth. And they say many more things, but importantly, there's a report that says there's a skill shortage. So if you're a student watching this, go ahead. If you're interested in geospatial sciences as a whole, there will be work for you. There will be jobs out there. And geospatial technologies is not only about satellites, it's about launching and rockets. So if you want to design rockets and test them out, then there's going to be jobs. If you're into robotics, there's going to be jobs. If you're into Earth observation, which is what I am doing, there will be jobs. Communications, something that you don't relate necessarily to geospatial sciences. There will be jobs out there, and those are related to geospatial sciences. And there's much, much more. Obviously, everything is surrounded by space. Everything that's above the Earth's atmosphere is related to space. And even going from mountain to mountain, or even using these little guys to tell people to evacuate, show better ways of evacuation, or better routes, or faster routes, or just telling people, hey, we think that you're close to a bushfire or an area that will flood, just go away. Where do I go? Where the phone is going to tell me. Again, if you're a student, there are a few things that are very in demand. So if you learn a little bit of Python, or if you're fluent in Python, then that's going to open a lot of doors. If you are fluent in R, or if you're just starting into R, then there are a lot of ways of applying geospatial analysis to that. Even if you just take a simple GIS course, there will be jobs. These are the skills of the future, let me tell you. Now, let me go back and summarize what a space station is. As you saw from the last few minutes of my talk, I am very passionate about space-related technologies, and how we can apply them. A space station is a person who, like me, is very interested, very excited about space technologies. Geospatial is the science of where and when things happen. There are countless applications, and the future is bright. And with that, I hope that you are free to go outside, enjoy a beer, go to the pub. The lockdown, I don't know if it has ended, but if it has, then you are free to go. And if you're interested, then get in touch with me. I'm really excited. I'm really hoping that I have inspired someone. Yeah, let's chat. Are there any questions? I'm very happy to answer any of them.